The mechanical keyboard hobby is fantastic. Whether you're someone that's wanted to upgrade your desk setup with a cool looking board, or someone that found the hobby because of ergonomic reasons, there are many reasons why we found the hobby, and many more reasons why we've stayed in the hobby. However, you can get overwhelmed by the vast amount of information, or you may burn out and realize the time you're spending negatively impacts your life. I'm hoping that my own experiences and these tips can help newcomers and enthusiasts avoid those situations. Everyone enjoys the hobby in their own way, and that's fine, as long as it doesn't negatively impact your life. Let's take a look at these 5 tips, and remember, these are just my personal opinions. I think this is important during the whole year, but especially now, because we're slowly getting into the time of year where we're going to see a lot of sales. If there's one thing that the majority of people in this hobby, and life in general, can agree on, it's making smart financial decisions. There are a lot of hobbies where you can get addicted to continuously buying things. I want to make it clear that I'm not talking about treating yourself with a gift every now and then, or buying something that you've planned for and have saved up for a long time. What I'm talking about here is excessively overspending, going over your budget, or using the majority of your income to buy keyboard-related items when you know you shouldn't be doing it. It's especially dangerous in collection-type hobbies like the keyboard hobby. Watches, car or motorcycle mods, instruments, clothes, purses, shoes, the list goes on. Things that you can use, but that also have a collecting aspect to them. Maybe you're rich or have so much disposable income that you can buy anything and everything without impacting your finances negatively. Maybe you've worked all your life and are currently retired. All that's left is just to enjoy buying keys. If so, then this tip may not be as helpful for you. But maybe you're someone that's bought things but have done so at the expense of almost maxing out your credit cards, pulling out money for savings unnecessarily. And you keep digging yourself into a deeper and deeper hole. Or maybe you're not spending in such an extreme way, but you find yourself realizing that you've developed some unhealthy spending habits. In that case, this tip may be more useful. Take a deep breath and pause. And know that there's always going to be something to buy. The latest and greatest iteration of a board will come out, and then a few months later, the next variant will come out. And you might feel FOMO into thinking that your purchase previously was no good, and you have to buy that newer version. There's always going to be another Budget King or Endgame board, and it's never worth it to spend beyond your means for that dopamine rush of getting something new. At the end of the day, the only person that can hold yourself responsible or make a decision to spend in a healthier way is you. Others may speak up if they see bad habits forming, but unless you make a decision to change, you can fall back into the same bad spending habits. It may be fun to buy more switches, keycaps, artisans, or keyboards, but when you eventually have a situation where you need that money that you've spent because of an unexpected expense, and you can't sell things off in time, you may regret your purchasing decisions. Even if you're someone that currently doesn't have to worry about living expenses or have any responsibilities, there will come a day where you'll have to deal with those things, and it's always worthwhile to have money when you need it. It's very easy not to plan ahead, or to be somewhat carefree with spending when you've got few responsibilities and you have your needs taken care of, but it's important to spend that time wisely and to save during that time in your life. Just because you have an option to spend money doesn't mean that you have to, even if all your expenses are already taken care of. Don't let FOMO or chasing a dopamine rush prevent you from being healthy financially. There's more to the keyboard hobby and life in general than just buying things and putting yourself in a bad financial situation. You're always going to miss something, and that's not a bad thing. So don't feel like just because something is on sale, you have to buy it. Next time you're faced with a possible purchasing decision, slow down. Ask yourself if you really need it and consider the alternative of not purchasing that item, or maybe have a plan to not buy any keycaps, switches, or accessories throughout the year, besides a few exceptions, and only do so during end of year sales to get the most out of your purchases. At least with that option, you'll save for most of the year, and if you do decide to spend, it would be far less than what you would originally spend. That's actually what my strategy has been the past 2 years. Save up the majority of my key budget for the majority of the year, since I know there's going to be a bunch of sales at the end of the year, and I'm not really picky when it comes to keycaps or switches. Oftentimes, I end up spending less than I would have had I splurged through the year, or even end up using that money that I would have hastily spent on things that were more important than just keeps, or maybe unexpected expenses that pop up. It's always nice to pass up on something because there's always going to be something to buy, keyboard related or non. And the feeling of not having to scrounge up money to afford that purchase because you've already planned ahead and saved before is great. If you have saved your money, and when something does come around where you decide it's worthwhile to buy, you already have that money to spend. And on top of that, if you do decide not to buy that item, hey, you've saved a lot of money. The ability to discipline yourself to delay gratification in the short term in order to enjoy greater rewards in the long term is the indispensable prerequisite for success. The great and sometimes stressful thing about our hobby is that there are so many ways to enjoy it. There are keyboards, obviously, but then there are different layouts, and within those layouts, there's mounting type, design language, plate material, and so on. Then you have keycaps of various different manufacturers, colorways, different profiles, different materials, and then you have switches with God knows how many different combination of materials, switch characteristics, and enough options for decision paralysis to kick in. Then you've got artisans, or maybe desk mats, or maybe you love the community the most, or maybe the meetups. The list goes on. There are so many reasons why the hobby is interesting and why people enjoy the hobby. Maybe you'll want to try everything and anything in order to figure out what you truly enjoy. And that's fine. If you're someone that enjoys everything, keep it up. Keep that enthusiasm as you experience what the hobby has to offer and share your experiences with others. In my opinion, the community is the best part of this hobby because the social aspect of it can carry your interest past times where you may feel burnt out or when you realize that you have an unhealthy purchasing habit, but you can still enjoy the hobby by socializing with others. But because the community is actually something that I'll talk about in an entirely different tip, I won't necessarily focus on it too much for this tip. If you're someone that's feeling overwhelmed or legitimately burnt out, this tip could be helpful for you, because maybe what you might want to try is honing in on what you really enjoy about the hobby. Let me introduce you to something that's not a new concept by any means, but something that's really helped me, the keyboard triangle. This isn't necessarily specific to keyboards only, as you can apply the triangle to keycaps and switches too, but let's start with keyboards. Imagine an equilateral triangle. All sides are equal, all angles are equal. At one point you have sound. At another point you have feel. And at the third point you have looks or aesthetics. Some people care about how a board sounds more than how it feels when you're typing or how it looks. Others care purely about aesthetics and don't really care about how the board sounds or feels like during typing. And others really enjoy how a keyboard feels like when you type on it and don't care as much about sound or characteristics. Whether you care about all three equally or care about one or two more than the others, figuring out where you fall in the keyboard triangle can be helpful when it comes to feeling overwhelmed or burnt out. Let me share my own story. From 2021 to 2022, I loved every aspect of the hobby for the most part. I didn't know about every single part, but as someone that was experiencing a lot of things for the first time, everything felt novel and fun. However, I could tell that at the end of 2022, I was starting to feel a little overwhelmed at the amount of options and aspects of the hobby. That's when I sat down and thought about what I really enjoyed, especially when it came to the keyboard triangle. Now, this obviously won't be accurate in every situation, but think of it in a general sense. When it comes to keyboards, you can tune the sound of a keyboard for the most part. You can also tune the typing feel of a keyboard. It might not be as easy, or you may not have as many options as tuning sound, especially if a keyboard only supports a specific mounting style, but generally, typing feel can be adjusted slightly. However, when it comes to aesthetics, or how a keyboard looks, it's not as easy to tune compared to sound and feel. For me, I realized that the most important thing about keyboards for me were the aesthetics. If a board looks cool, I can make sacrifices in the sound or feel department, realizing that and making a choice to not have to be up to date on every single switch that comes out, or not having to get a bunch of keycap colorways or materials, made my decision-making process a lot simpler when it came to the keyboard hobby. Less things to worry about, basically. To this day, I've narrowed down my switch choices, the Cherry MX Reds or Blacks, Cherry MX Browns, and KTT Roses for about every single board that I have and future boards that I'll have. Do I know that not every board will sound as good if I only have those three choices? Absolutely. And I'm fine with that. Cherry MX Linears for aluminum or metal plates, Cherry MX Browns for plateless builds and sometimes plastic plates, and KTT Roses for plastic plates is my usual strategy. And when it comes to keycaps, Beige, white on black, black on white are my go-tos, specifically GMK, DCS, and whatever beige PBT set that I'm able to get. I narrowed down my interests and figured out what I enjoyed about the hobby when it comes to things outside of the community. Instead of drinking through a fire hose, I started drinking through a straw. I no longer felt overwhelmed about having so many options. I didn't feel burnt out about having to stay on top of the latest and greatest releases, and all I needed to care about was if a board came out that looked cool or not, and if I want to support the designer or vendor. Does that mean I hate new Switches coming out, or I don't like any other aspect of the hobby? Absolutely not. I appreciate those things for what they are. But because I was content and finally understood what I enjoyed about the hobby, I could focus on things that brought me joy. Keyboards, specifically keyboard aesthetics, and not sweat the other stuff. Now, does that mean you can't like anything and everything? Does that mean that you shouldn't enjoy buying and trying new Switches that come out? Of course not. Again, this tip is only for those that may be feeling overwhelmed or burnt out. If your enjoyment levels are holding, and you're not being negatively impacted by how you're enjoying the hobby, you do you. 2023 and onwards, for me, has been equally as enjoyable after I didn't feel overwhelmed and after I realized what I enjoyed. I don't have to worry about what Switch I'll use, since I only have 3 choices. I don't have to worry about what keycaps to use, since I only have a few choices. I can focus purely on keyboards, and within keyboards, aesthetics being most important over sound and feel. It's basically like buying only white and black t-shirts. You only have a choice between a white or a black t-shirt, and you're not spending unnecessary time out of your day to figure out what color shirt should I wear. I shrunk the hobby down to a manageable level to where I no longer felt overwhelmed. Instead of focusing on anything and everything, my field of vision narrowed, and I don't really worry about what's in my peripherals. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or burnt out, try and figure out what you truly enjoy about the hobby and focus your time and effort into those areas. If you're someone that just wants a quick recommendation or doesn't really want to get into the hobby, I can see why someone may not want to really do research or learn more about the hobby in general. However, like many things, even a little bit of education and learning about aspects of the hobby can be beneficial, even for those that don't really want to be in the hobby. For everyone else, learning more about what goes on into pricing for keyboards, keycaps, switches, materials, and so on can help you make sure that you, first of all, don't get ripped off or spend more money than you have to, but second of all, it can help you determine what you really enjoy about the hobby. You don't have to learn about everything immediately either, but that willingness to seek out information and to be open to admitting that you don't know everything can actually help you grow as a person. For example, you may not be interested in anything but a keyboard when you first start, but then you find out about a brand, then you see if another brand sells something similar, then you dive deeper into why an item costs what it costs, whether it's a good value proposition or if the price is justified, and so on. It can only benefit you in the long run. As a beginner, you may not have a reference point. You may not know if a board that costs $100 is a good deal or not, and especially coming in brand new and having been using membrane keyboards or gaming keyboards, the price of many things may seem astronomical. $500 for a keyboard? I could buy a PS5 with that money. Or I could fly to some extravagant place for vacation. But say you take the time to understand why a $500 board is $500. Well, maybe it's made of many different parts with many different materials like brass or copper. Maybe the design is intricate, so it costs more to CNC. Perhaps the board weighs a lot, or very few units are made, resulting in a higher per unit cost versus a design that's resulted in 1,000 units being made. I can tell you that something is expensive or cheap, but without truly understanding the why, it's just some arbitrary number. That's not to say everything has to be about value. If you see a board that costs $50 versus a similar board that costs $200, the $50 board isn't automatically better. This is where educating yourself to figure out what you truly enjoy comes in play. If all you care about is bang for your buck, that's perfectly fine. Nowadays, boards that are sub $100 are insane compared to just 2 years ago. You'd be lucky to find a few boards that were passable back then. But nowadays, there's so many boards in that price range that offer a lot of customization, features that are usually found on more expensive boards, and so on. It may not sound as good as a more expensive board or be as intricate looking, but hey, as long as you're happy with your board, that's all that matters. And from the opposite view, just because you have a board that costs $200 versus the $50 board doesn't mean that you got scammed or that your purchase wasn't worth it. It just depends on what you enjoy. For me, I started in the budget range of sub $100 keyboards because I couldn't even fathom spending more. Plastic Keychron K-Series, Tester 68s, ACO boards. To me, they all sounded good and I enjoyed them. But as I learned more and more about the hobby, made friends with designers, figured out my own preferences, I realized that I really love boards that may cost more, but have a great story behind them. Or they cost more because I wanted a huge brass or copper weight, which costs more than a plastic keyboard. There's nothing wrong with continuing to enjoy cheaper boards if that makes you happy. I'm just explaining my story and how I figured out what I enjoyed. If a board is exactly what I want and it costs less, of course I'd snap it up. But what I'm saying is that the characteristics that I found are most important to me are not normally found in cheaper boards and are found in pricier boards, so I gravitate towards those boards. That doesn't mean that I dislike cheap boards. The Bakeneko Go that I had the privilege of building with my friend is still currently my go-to recommendation if someone wants a cheap PC Bakeneko-esque 60% board. You don't have to start with cheaper boards, but at least for me, it was a valuable experience. Plus, I didn't want to go to the latest and greatest or most expensive board right away. If I had done that without knowing anything about what went into the price of the boards, I could have gotten disenchanted, or I could have become an elitist. Also, educating yourself when it comes to vendors and designers can help you avoid situations where you're joining a group buy or purchase an item only to realize that you got scammed. This happens rarely, but it has happened and will continue to happen. People that don't know better get sucked in without being educated enough, purchase things or join group buys that are nothing but cash grabs. Does that mean you'll be able to avoid any unfortunate situation if you're educated enough? No, sometimes things just happen. But at least you can lower that risk of being possibly scammed if you learn more about the hobby. In the end, educating yourself can help you figure out what you enjoy and also help you avoid bankrupting yourself. What's the best way to learn about things? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about in the next tip. The community. The community. In my opinion, the greatest way to enjoy the hobby. Don't get me wrong, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, not by a long shot. But if there's anything that will extend the longevity of a hobby for me, it's being invested and enjoying being in the community. Well, what if you're an introvert or someone that's just happy to lurk and read things or watch things yet not comment or talk? No problem. The feeling of being connected to someone or a group of people is what's important. For example, when I finally decided that I wanted to get into the hobby, I browsed r/mechanical keyboards, found a few content creators on YouTube and Twitch, and basically consumed keyboard content. From doing that, I was able to decide where I enjoyed spending my time learning about keyboards the most, and from there, lurked in that place's social hub, whether it be a subreddit or a Discord channel, forums like GeekHack, or any other place where the group congregated. I naturally gravitated towards those places that shared my same beliefs, humor, and interests. I rarely commented or talked to anyone, but I still felt like I was part of the community. Slowly but surely, I gathered up the courage to ask my newbie questions, found other newbies like me, or kind enthusiasts that didn't mind interacting with me, and soon enough, I was experiencing and learning about the hobby along like-minded individuals. Eventually, I found the places where I felt like I fit in the most, where I enjoyed interacting with people, and even made friends. Do you have to go through the same cycle? Absolutely not. Again, if you're content with asking a question here or there, or simply watching, that's great. If you enjoy being part of a community, regardless of whether you comment or talk to people, that's the goal. I learned and continue to learn so many things from so many super friendly people, which are the majority of the people that you meet in the hobby. Unless you're arrogant, disrespectful, or are asking about things the wrong way, the majority of people you meet are really nice and helpful. On top of that, I learned that there were real-life meetups where people gathered and brought their keys or keyboard-related items to chat and interact with each other. There's just something about being with other like-minded individuals and expressing your love of the hobby and hearing the same level of excitement from them. People and the community are truly what makes this hobby great. One unintended consequence of befriending people in our hobby is that sometimes those same people may end up designing a keyboard or a keycap set that you could support. I was fortunate enough to have met James, aka Mashedwork, last year during Thoctober. Little did I know, I was about to start a friendship with someone who, turns out, designs keyboards and keycap sets. On top of that, he's an absolute gem, and one of the nicest and most generous people that I have ever had the privilege of meeting and calling a friend. Not only did our interests align in terms of design language for keyboards and keycap sets and other aspects of the hobby, but now I had a chance to do anything and everything I could to support him and to help him achieve his dreams through his designs. From an acquaintance who was partially responsible for me getting the greatest keyboard gift ever in the Muramasa, to a friend, and then to a friend that was also designing cool stuff that I enjoyed, I never would have thought that would happen. Not everyone you meet is going to be genuine and a good person, but there are so many in the hobby that it just makes you happy that you're in the same hobby as so many of those people. For the most part, we're all keyboard nerds that love the hobby, love talking about the hobby with each other, and love that we're all on this keyboard journey together. The keyboard hobby is a great way to meet friends. You can find fantastic people in any hobby or anywhere in life, but the fact that there is a disproportionate amount of good lads and ladettes in the keyboard hobby brings a smile to my face. Especially when those unfortunate situations occur with vendors or designers, we see truly generous individuals step in and help make a bad situation into one that's somewhat salvageable. Then, you get people like Gian, who does everything he can to do things the right way and does all he can to fight against scalpers by simply making more boards. And you get people like Hoff, Jay from Prototypist, Novel Keys Mike, Gerald and Desk Hero, the lads from Canon Keys, Omnitype. The list goes on regarding people and businesses that have stepped in and helped when vendors or designers have hurt the hobby. There are so much good, friendly, helpful people, and so many instances where people sacrifice their own time or money to help you or to help make this hobby truly great, that it's just a blessing. And the meetups, oh man. Sometimes I forget that it really doesn't matter what someone likes as long as they like it. You see the happiness on someone's face when they explain to you this insane split ergo DIY kit that they made, or someone with a board or keycap or switch combination that might not be considered as good nowadays, but they're so happy when they're talking to you about it and they're sharing that board with you. It really goes to show you that it doesn't matter what anyone thinks. If you enjoy something, that's all that matters. And at the end of the day, everyone wants to feel like they belong somewhere. Life is already hard enough as it is, especially if you've been going solo for a while. You feel good about being a part of something. Everyone wants to feel like they're helpful as well. Maybe it's helping newcomers the way that you were helped when you first entered the hobby, or doing your part to answer questions in help channels and discords, or on various subreddit help posts. Maybe it's helping the community you're in to grow, or simply just being in the background and happy that you found a great community. It's truly a blessing to have found such a fantastic hobby with such a fantastic community, and it makes the entire journey from learning about keyboards to calling yourself an enthusiast feel like it's been worth it. The last tip that I have for today is to have balance in anything that you do. This applies to every tip that I've brought up in this video, as well as life in general. Feeling like you're starting to have an issue with buying a lot of things or impulse buying? Take a step back and pause your spending. Feel like you've been spreading yourself a bit too thin and getting burnt out? Try and narrow your focus on a few things that you really enjoy. Overwhelmed or have information overload? Take a break. Focus on building on things that you already know or solidify your understanding of topics before moving on to others. Spending too much time on Discord or subreddit community? Set yourself a time limit every day to spend online until it feels like you've regained balance. When you learn about a new hobby, you sometimes feel like you just have to submerge yourself in the hobby and you put other things aside in your life. If you're someone that just wants to get in and out or wants to find an end game and be done with a hobby, that's your decision. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, but for others, they want the keyboard hobby to be a part of their lives for as long as possible. Even if they do achieve an end game board that they can enjoy and not necessarily purchase anything else, they stay connected to the community or hang out with friends, and they still enjoy the hobby even if they're not necessarily buying as much as they used to. If you're in it for the long haul, balance is crucial, because unless you're built differently, there will be times where you do have to step back a bit and take breaks every now and then to focus on other aspects of life. Maybe work picks up, so you won't be online as much in your communities. Perhaps you're in grad school and you have to finish your thesis. You can still enjoy the hobby, albeit at a slower pace. You're balancing being part of the hobby with the rest of your life, as you should. There's nothing wrong with being invested and spending more time keyboarding at various times of the year or your life, as long as the other parts of your life aren't negatively impacted. Because chances are, you'll balance that out by being not as active when you get busy in other parts of your life. During this time of year, I'm usually spending more of my time focusing on my job or work and my family, with hobbies kind of taking the backseat. I still enjoy keyboarding and lurking in different communities, but it's a different level of engagement than, say, the spring, or when work isn't as hectic and when the kids are at school. For most of us, the keyboard hobby is not a necessity, and spending time outside of the hobby is absolutely fine and sometimes required. Don't feel like you have to live and breathe keyboards 24/7 and lose balance with the other parts of your life. Unless you're disrespectful, doing harm to others, or negatively impacting your life or other people's lives, there's usually no wrong way to enjoy the hobby. There are so many reasons why someone gets introduced to the hobby, many reasons why people stay in the hobby, and why it's currently a great time to be in the hobby. Maybe it's not as crazy with ICs or group buys, or new things coming out every other week like during 2020 or 2021, but the amount of options and the prices for so many things really make it a great time for keyboarding. Communities are in full swing, the holidays are coming up, so you may be able to introduce your friends and family to the hobby, and it's just a great time in general. I don't know about you, but the end of the year tends to make me more introspective and look back on what happened during the year. I remember the good times and the bad times, but I'm hopeful for that future and for good things to come, especially when it comes to the keyboard hobby. I hope this video has been somewhat helpful for you, and I truly do mean it when I say I'm appreciative of each and every one of you. It doesn't matter if we've communicated before, if you've never watched any of my other videos, or if you just skipped to the end. Thank you for being awesome, choosing to spend your time watching my content, and here's to an awesome end of the year and an even better 2025. I love you all, and see you next time.